I'm delighted to welcome Tony Horgan. Now, Tony, now aged 90, has published his autobiography. It's available for just $8.99 on Amazon. Now, it's not only an anecdotal in personal sense, but serves as a valuable backdrop to what Tony describes as the hungry 1930s. Now, Tony grew up in Killarney in County Kerry, coming to London in 1946. Now, his story is beautifully told in print, but here to give us just a little insight into his interesting life in his own words, I have Tony Horgan. Tony, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jerry.
Tony, they say that everyone has a book in them, but not everyone has the drive and motivation to actually fulfill getting it into print and distribution. What were your reasons for bringing it out? How did it all start?
Well, it all started because I remember writing a letter to the Kerryman, and that was about my shopping experiences in the 20s, 30s and 40s, when we go down to the local pub and we get our shopping like cheese, sugar and jam. And jam in those days was in earthenware jars, and also butter. Then we'd cross over the road to T.T. O'Connor's for our bread, and we get a bag of end loaves there. They were called end loaves because they were soiled during the baking process, so they came cheaper. So we get a bag of end loaves for a tenner, which was the equivalent of sixpence in the pre-decimal coinage. Then we had the bag of end loaves. We got down to Anne Sullivan for our milk. Now the milk came straight, it wasn't pasteurised milk, it was straight from the cow womb. And we get our milk from Annie Sullivan of the 98 bar. And then we cross over to Mix O'Hurley for our meat. Well, I wrote a letter about those experiences to the Kerryman, and the Kerryman published the letter. The curator of the Muckross Museum read the letter and congratulated the editor of the Kerryman for publishing the letter, and he said it was nice to see writers like Tony Horgan putting these letters to print because otherwise they'll be forgotten. And it's nice to read them, and he said he'd like other people to do the same. So that's what encouraged me to write my book, The Lark in the Bowl Sang Sad Songs.
Excellent title, I'll have to say. And now, is it intended, do you intend it as a sort of a legacy, for example, for your family, as well as a social history?
My book, I dedicated my book to my late wife Mary, who passed away on Easter Sunday, April 20, 2003. So it's dedicated to my late wife Mary, and also to my family. So that's and also to the people of Killarney, which I'll never forget Killarney. It's lustrous lakes, it's golden sands, and the Cloister Can Muckross Road. Of course, the greatest asset of any town are its people. I haven't forgotten the people, from the butcher, the baker, the harness maker, all along. I haven't forgotten, I've not written about them. So that's another thing that encouraged me to write the book.
Right, now, how many, when you were growing up, how many was in your family?
There was one, two, three, Pat, Matty. There was 5 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay. And your parents? You all
And my parents said there was 9.
Right. Okay. Now, the book, it tells vividly of happy days exploring the local countryside, and as you've mentioned there, about the beauty of Kerry with the lakes, etc. At the time, were you aware of the privilege and the freedom and of the landscapes as a child? I mean, did you realise, you were in, at that time, did you realise you were in such a fantastic place?
Well, I was growing up in as much as there was a lot of this. That one of the diseases there, we used to call it the black or the white plague, because, in other words, that was another name for, it's called a consumption in those days. So that was rampant in those days, and they had convalescent homes for it, 2 or 3 for Butterfant and Doneraile and a place back in Tralee. So there was a lot of, and of course then again, the only benefit we had in those days was the 6 shillings a week dole. Well, what we used to say about the 6 shillings a week dole was it was a shortcut to the cemetery. You wouldn't last long, 12 months. So I didn't see so much of the freedom of those days as I saw the poverty of those days.
Indeed, which I think is a typically marked story for any place in Ireland at that time. It will undoubtedly was there was huge poverty. On another angle, I believe you were a cinema buff. You were a cinema buff. I believe you like films.
Yes,
and
I
cinema.
was. When I was going to school, I always bought the Boys Cinema, which was very popular also with James Joyce, because James Joyce opened the first cinema in Dublin. But James Joyce also bought his Boys Cinema. Well, I liked the Boys Cinema. I loved it, and I've liked it so much I've included all the old characters in my book, like Boris Karloff playing the monster and Bela Lugosi playing the Count Dracula, and Lon Chaney playing the Wolfman, and oh yes, Boys Cinema very popular. I purchased it every week. Yes, and as I say, yes, I like the Boys Cinema. And then there used to be a poster come out once a week about the different pictures in the cinema. You had the Sundays, you had the westerns, the old cowboys, Buck Jones and Tim McCoy. And then during the days you had the horror films, which Boris Karloff was usually the monster and all that. And then, of course, you had the gangster pictures, the porn, which Prohibition was rife in. Prohibition started, well, the Volstead Act started in 1921, and that's when or 1919, that's when the gangsters started. So, yes, I liked my Boys Cinema, and I bought it for years.
Excellent. Now, you came to London, you left for London 68 years ago. Did you come over on a cattle boat?
I came over on the cattle boat.
Which was called, because maybe a number of people may not be aware of this, but the cattle boat had cattle underneath and people were on top.
Quite right, yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, when you came, recently I spoke to Alton Cowley, a historian, who he did a book, he wrote a book, and he also took out a CD of the voices of the men who built Britain. And this was the people who came from Ireland who worked on the building sites, the tunnelling, etc. And he spoke of their various emotions, sadness, the sadness at leaving, the loneliness, etc. When you came over here all those years ago, did you have that? Did you have the loneliness, the sadness? Did you miss Ireland? Was it tough?
The title of my book was The Lark in the Bower Sang Sad Songs. Now, as I said, well, that tells a story in itself, because the lark sang sad songs because he was lamenting about the mass exodus of people from the shores of Ireland onto the shores of Britain, looking for work denied them at home. And these were echoes of the old satanic mills. So I was sad, yes.
And it was tough.
I was sad, yes.
And it was tough. It was tough when you came over.
Yes, it was tough, because when we landed here, you'd only one way out of Ireland. That was Dunleary to Holly. There was only one way in those days. And when we landed at Euston, we landed like a no man's land. We'd no welcome. We'd no one to advise us, no one to give us help, no one to give us financial help. We were on our own. We either sank or we swam. Well, some slept rough on the streets, others pressed on regardless, and others were never seen again. They probably wound up in unmarked graves. But we carried on, and when looking for work, and the work we usually were offered was work nobody else wanted. Low pay, long hours, and poor working conditions.
Which is something which, to a degree, happens today.
It happens today, yes. It
Where
happens
you,
today.
hence you've got
But
immigrants.
what
who-
you don't see today, when we were looking for digs, we had the notice on the window, no Irish wanted. Well, that was made you feel alien when you got that notice. But then don't forget, that notice, there's no Irish wanted. Well, what did we have to come back to? And on top of that, there was over 300,000 Irish men and women enlisted in the forces during the war. They were awarded 8 Victoria Crosses. There was over 1,000 Irish pilots and crew massacred or killed in the Battle of Britain. And all those immigrants that came over in the 68 years ago, they rebuilt war-torn Britain. They manned the buses, they manned the streets, they manned the factories, they even manned, the Irish nurses were in high demand in they ran the hospitals. But so that no Irish wanted, I felt alienated really, but that was the fact of the matter, and you had to press on regardless.
Yes, it was.
And also, by staying put, we helped the new immigrants that did come over up the ladder so they could avoid jobs that were hazardous and would, because some of these people that worked in these factories, as you know, worked with asbestos, and that would show itself clinically 20 or 30 years later.
Indeed.
So by staying with our steely Irish determination, we stayed put, and we helped them up the ladder when they did come. But of course, again, when it came to the welfare of our Irish immigrants in those days, the Irish government had a very poor record indeed.
Yes, it was something which was never even thought of, was it?
That's right. Very poor record.
But yourself, when you come over here, I mean, you settled down. You had a very, very happy life with your late wife Mary, and
Thank God we did.
and a family. And you were also involved very much in Irish community affairs, as you hinted there, in helping out immigrants.
Yes.
And you were involved actually with the club is now gone, St Augustine's Social Club in Hammersmith. You were involved with St Augustine's.
Oh yes, I
Hammersmith.
was on the management committee. Yes.
Yeah.
I used to do book the bands and do the treasurer and do the secretary and do the chairman, and it was a nice social evening for the local parish and the local people. It was they enjoyed the night. They enjoyed the entertainment. That was usually bands and music and foxtrots and quick steps, and yes, there was. I was on for about 11 years.
Right. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Tony, your book, I'll have to say, sounds absolutely fascinating. It's your story, no doubt, resonates with so many, and there'll be so many other people who recognise parts of it from things they've heard from their parents, grandparents, from history. And indeed, I think if anybody was not familiar with the way life was in Ireland back then, and with the way it was when you came over here back in those days, I think you're a voice which is from possibly a few years ago, but something which everybody, I think, should be made aware of.
Yeah.
And your book is available, just to remind you once again, your book is available on Amazon. And also, we're giving away a copy on the programme as well. We'll be doing that next week.
Well, as you mentioned that now, there was, after you talk about people liking the book, I've had a lot of praise about my book. In fact, in St. Augustine's Saturday night, one of the parishioners, we call him Mike the blacksmith. He
Right.
used to be a blacksmith. And he came to me and he says to me, "I've read your book, Tony, it's great. You were in the Irish Army?" He said, "I says I was." And he liked it. And whilst I was talking to him, then Pat Cooney come to me. He used to manage the distillers.
Okay.
And Pat bought a book. So then there was on the night of the launch in St. Augustine's, which was a great success, Rose Hannon says to me, "I went home," she says, "and told my mother about Peggy's Lake."
Right.
And her mother loved it. She says, "You done us proud," are her exact words.
Excellent. And I think it doesn't matter where in Ireland you come from. I think it's anybody from any part of the country can identify with it.
That's quite right, Jerry. Quite right, Jerry. Yes.
Tony, listen, I wish you every success. We'll be keeping all listeners up to date with everything that's happening with you in the book. Tony, it's been a privilege to speak with you.
And it's a privilege that you've taken me on your radio, and I'm very glad to hear, Jerry.
Tony, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jerry.